Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 14 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and once again, we are coming to you from the international headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia, and we are looking forward to having some great discussions in the coming weeks and months. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week and have John Searby with us, who is the Executive Director of Catawba Riverkeeper. John, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Happy to be here.
Very good. So we try not to waste any time and kind of try to get right to it. So if you don't mind, can you just start off with sharing us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As you said, I'm the Executive Director of Catawba Riverkeeper, and I live in Belmont, down off South New Hope Road. I grew up in Illinois and found my way south to play college basketball at Milligan College in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Okay, wow.
And spent 10 years as a college basketball coach, then 10 years in corporate sponsorship, sales, and marketing, and was living on the river, selling billboards and outdoor advertising, and decided working for a nonprofit and doing what I love, get my personal life and my professional life a little more lined up was the way to go. So 2.5 years ago, I took over Catawba Riverkeeper, and it's been the best and hardest job of my life.
Was there anything specific that drew you to that other than your interest in the river or where you were living, or did that kind of describe it already?
Well, it's kind of evolved throughout life. You take a boy out of the cornfields of Illinois and you put him in the mountains of East Tennessee, you kind of naturally fall in love with the outdoors. And so my love affair with outdoor recreation, mountain biking, hiking, fly fishing, kayaking really started in college. And my wife and I met kind of over those passions. And so it's been a part of our married life for 20 years. And
okay.
We moved to the banks of the South Fork in Belmont about 5.5 years ago, and that's when we joined Catawba Riverkeeper and started getting involved with what they do as volunteers and donors. But when the tug to get out of the corporate world and stop wearing a suit and tie and 8 to 5 started pulling, it just seemed like a logical fit for me.
Okay, well that's a great story. So with that progression, I mean, what can you tell us about the mission and maybe even history? I'm not sure that was on the question list we gave you, but the mission of Catawba Riverkeeper, and then maybe any history that you could share about the organization.
Yeah, the mission of Catawba Riverkeeper, we like to say it's very simple, but it's hard. Mm-hmm. So our mission is to preserve and protect the more than 9,000 miles of waterways in the Catawba River Basin, and we do that to ensure that there's clean and plentiful water for generations to come. We were founded in 1997, actually a group called the Central Council of Governments. Going into the 2000s, they were doing a lot of meeting about what does the region need going forward. And one of the things that came out of that study was there was a concern about the quantity of water that was going to be available here. And they felt like there needed to be a third-party, nonprofit watchdog. And they asked the Lake Wylie Marine Commission, the Lake Norman Marine Commission to throw in some money and start Catawba Riverkeeper. So in 1997, we were formed, and we've been based in Charlotte for the first 23 years of our existence. And then in April of this year, we moved to McAdenville to help really realize one of our founders' dreams, which was to have a headquarters on the banks of the river.
That makes sense, yeah.
And so when I took over 2.5 years ago, one of my questions was, can somebody explain to me why the Riverkeeper's office is in uptown Charlotte, surrounded by concrete?
That's funny.
And so we started right away to try to find a place and looked in several locations in Gaston County, a couple in Mecklenburg County, and met the folks at FAR and have a great partnership going with them to renovate one of the old mills in McAdenville as our headquarters.
That's good. Yeah, that would be kind of like our building here not having air conditioning in it.
Yeah, just open all the windows. Yeah, no need for any air.
Off the best. So I'm going to just step back 1 second, make sure I heard you right. I think you said 9,000 miles.
That's right.
Okay. So what can you share real quick? What areas and how from here, what all does that uncover?
Yeah, so the Catawba River Basin starts up in the mountains
okay.
near a place called Old Fort, North Carolina, right
okay.
off I-40, there's actually a place you can hike to the headwaters. It's called Catawba Falls. It's a beautiful 2.5, 3 mile hike up to the falls. That's where the water springs from the earth and starts the Catawba River.
Wow.
And it flows roughly east and joins the Linville River to form Lake James, and then continues east, and there's a series of lakes that really make up a bulk of the Catawba River. So you have Lake James as the northernmost, then Lake Rhodus, Lake Hickory, makes a hard southern turn to Lookout Shoals, Lake Norman, Mountain Island Lake, Lake Wiley, then flows into South Carolina, and you have Fishing Creek Lake, Great Falls, Lake Wateree, and they're 75 miles below Lake Wateree until it converges with the Congaree River inside Congaree National Park. So that's 225 miles of linear river.
Right.
But the basin itself flows through 26 counties in North and South Carolina, and that 9,000 miles of waterways is all the drainage, which includes the South Fork, which is the primary tributary. It's the largest tributary of the river that runs right through the middle of Gaston County. And then obviously Lake Wiley that borders the eastern side of Gaston County as well.
I want to just point that out because I think, I'm a native of Gaston County and obviously have been to Lake James, Lake Norman, Mountain Island, Lake Wiley, Lake Wateree. I've been on the South Fork River. But I think a lot of even a lot of locals might not be able to put that in perspective without kind of getting into those details. So
yeah, you drive around Gaston County, if you're driving across Dutchman's Creek, the South Fork, Duhart's Creek, Catawba Creek, those are all tributaries of the Catawba. They're going to find their way into most of those into the South Fork and then into Lake Wiley eventually.
Right. So I know there's a lot of different things that you guys are involved with, but can you talk about maybe some of the specific initiatives or anything you kind of want to share about what other than just cleaning up or again, just anything you feel like you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so we execute our mission through 3 pillars: education, engagement, and protection. And so everything we do falls into one of those 3 categories. Education is sometimes really obvious, things like summer camps for kids, which was going on this week at the boathouse in McAdenville. We have day camps for kids. We have programs where we go into the schools. We have a program called Creek where we go into Charlotte and get kids who don't have access to the water a chance to come out and get on a kayak and learn how to do that. So education encompasses a lot of traditional things, but also encompasses adult education, things like our Riverkeeper Learning Series, where every month we address a different issue related to water. Last month was breweries, so we did a brewery tour and had the brewer at Birdsong tell everybody about how important water is and how the pH level is important to the kind of beer they make.
That sounds more like my type of educational event.
Yeah, it's educational, right, in air quotes. And, so education, that's the kind of stuff we do in that space. In engagement, that's really anything that's fun or interesting on the water. The most popular thing that we do under engagement is kayaking. So we have the boathouse in McAdenville. We do kayak rentals there. We do kayak rentals at the Greenway in McAdenville where you can paddle down to Cramerton and we'll shuttle you back. We do specialty trips where we go up to the Bridgewater section up below Lake James, or we go down to Great Falls, and there's beautiful places to paddle all over this river basin.
Right.
But the other part of engagement is cleanups. We do monthly cleanups where if somebody just wants to get out and get their hands dirty and get their feet wet, they can get into a creek and help us clean up. We have a huge event coming up on October 2nd called River Sweep. That's our biggest volunteer event of the year. Last year, 1,400 people at 43 different sites took 30 tons of trash out of the river. Oh, wow. So that's an engagement piece for us is, get the community out into their own local waterways and clean up the creek or clean up the lake. So engagement's a big piece, and River Sweep is coming up here on October 2nd this year. So CatawbaRiversweep.org is where people can go to find out information about that.
Okay.
And then the last pillar that I'll talk about is protection. And this is really what we're best known for. This is our advocacy work where we're working with local, regional, and state municipalities to try to strengthen protections for water quality. We're holding those who have permits accountable to following those permits, making sure they're not discharging things that are above the allowable limit. And just generally keeping an eye on the lakes. We're a membership-driven organization, and we have about 5,800 members across those 26 counties. And they're our eyes and ears. They're the people who are out there fishing on the river and taking their kids out on the pontoon on the weekend. And so we rely on them to keep an eye on things and
Sure.
report it back to us. We have a staff of 10, but 9,000 miles of water is a lot of
Yes,
territory to cover. So that's kind of the buckets of how we do our work.
Is it fair to say there's 5,800 members? Are they spread out pretty well across all 9,000 miles? Or
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, they're kind of congregated around the lakes.
Sure.
A lot of our members are really passionate about the water. That's why they belong to the organization.
Right. Yep.
But we've got folks all over the place, and we've got some folks who just come here to vacation in the summer and they've joined because they appreciate what we do. So yeah, they're pretty spread out.
Okay. If you look back at your time with Catawba Riverkeeper, can you? It may be a hard question, but maybe one or two things you're most proud of accomplishing while you've been with the organization.
Yeah, I think it's actually not a real hard question because we've got one thing that we're really well known for that I think probably if you did a quiz and said, tell me about Catawba Riverkeeper, half the people would answer this way. So on January 1st of 2020, we entered into a settlement agreement with Duke Energy to remove all of the coal ash in unlined pits left in the Catawba River. So Allen Steam Station on Lake Wylie and Marshall Steam Station on Lake Norman. There's about 116 million tons of coal ash sitting in pits that are unlined. Yeah. And that leaches into the groundwater and then finds its way into the lakes, which is our drinking water. So we had been in about an 8-year litigation wrestling match with Duke over that and successfully got the Riverbend coal station on Mountain Island closed first, and that was completely excavated. And then in January of 2020, we entered into that settlement agreement with Duke, and they're going to remove all of the ash from those unlined pits and move it to either lined pits or off-site to other locations where it's not going to affect our waterways. So that's by far the thing that we're best known for and we're most proud of. It's the largest environmental cleanup by volume in the history of the United States, larger than the BP oil spill, larger than the Exxon Valdez as far as volume of pollution removed. Okay. So that has actually not only been a great thing for the environment, but it's been a great thing for our organization. It's allowed us to reset our relationship with Duke Energy. And, I was unsure about how that was going to go. This all happened within the first year that I was here. But it's been fantastic. We have a great working relationship with them now. I think the recognition that the things that used to be okay, in the 1950s don't work anymore. Mm-hmm. That's a realization that we're all coming to, I think.
For a lot of different things.
For a lot of things, yeah, and particularly around environmental concerns. And so we were really proud to be able to come to that agreement and kind of move forward on behalf of the citizens in the basin.
So, again, a lot of this question comes partially from my ignorance, but also maybe for some of our listeners don't realize the relationship of Duke Energy to all of this water. I mean, am I correct that Duke Energy at one time or still does own some of the land, or how is their association with the whole Catawba River Basin? And
yeah, that's a great question. It's a common misconception. A lot of people think Duke owns the lakes. That's not true. They own a lot of land along the lakes. A lot of land. That's actually what I meant to say, but that's when I said my ignorance. Yeah, no. The best way I've found to describe it is if you think about the lakes like a three-legged stool, and the water is the top of the stool.
Okay.
If you have a three-legged stool, if any of the legs gets out of balance, then you can't sit, comfortably. So Duke Energy is one leg of that stool. And they've been given responsibility by the federal government to manage the flow because they have permitted dams that create hydroelectric energy. Yep. So the Catawba is commonly referred to as the hardest working river in America because there's more electricity generated per mile by this river than any other river in the United States. Okay. We have 11 hydroelectric dams, 2 coal-fired power plants, 2 nuclear power plants, and 3 million people get their electricity from this.
That's significant.
And, we got to turn on the HVAC somehow, right?
That's right, yes.
And so in the summer, when the temperature goes up quick and your HVAC kicks on, the hydroelectric dams are the piece that really start to move the needle from electric generation standpoint. So they've been given a permit by the federal government to manage those. That comes with a lot of responsibility. They also have to manage lake levels within a certain range. They have to make sure that fish habitat is maintained, that shoreline management is maintained. They have requirement for access. So a lot of our boat launches and kayak launches and parks are funded by Duke and are donated to cities by Duke. So they're one leg of the stool. The other leg of the stool is all the other permitted users. So that's everything from Two Rivers Utilities that takes water out of the river for Gaston County's drinking water and discharges the waste of the county back into another place in the river. It is businesses like Clarent Corporation in Mount Holly that has a permit to take water out, use it for their processes, clean it, and then discharge it. So all those permitted users have a stake, obviously. They want plentiful water. They want it to be clean for their purposes. The third leg is all of us. It's the people, because these waters are, you hear this term a lot, waters of the United States. That's what it means. These waters belong to us. So the South Fork River belongs to everybody who lives in Gaston County. Lake Wiley belongs to the people of Gaston, York, and Mecklenburg County. But you and I as individuals don't obviously have a strong enough voice to balance out Duke Energy, the largest utility in America, and 350 permitted users. So the Catawba Riverkeeper becomes the third leg of the stool. And that's how our membership, by supporting us, uses their voice, and we become the voice of the people. So that's kind of how the relationship with Duke works. Duke has a lot of responsibility. They take a lot of responsibility for what happens on the lake, but they don't own the lakes. Everyone has access to it through whatever public access is. And people who live on the lakes have a responsibility of their own, to do what's right and follow guidelines that are in place by the county and the state and the federal government.
Okay, well, that was a terrific description, and I think that was clears it up for myself and a lot of people that are listening. So, this is a podcast about Gaston's great. So, why would you say that specifically? Why is Gaston County better? Because Catawba Riverkeeper is here.
Well, I touched on it earlier. We really can't do our job effectively unless we're on the water. There's two things that make us unique. One is that we're on the water, doing work on the water, in the water, testing the water. The other thing is that we have a full basin view. So we don't just get tunnel vision around what's going on in Charlotte or what's going on in Gaston County. But the reason it's so important for us to be in Gaston County is because we can literally walk out our door 20 steps and take a sample out of the South Fork. And the South Fork is the largest tributary. It's also one of the most impaired portions of the Catawba River. And so if we're going to improve the water quality of the entire basin, and specifically Lake Wiley, it's got to start with the South Fork. And, this county relies on the South Fork and Lake Wiley for a lot of economic development. A lot of property taxes are generated from businesses there. A lot of recreational activities go on in the lake and the river. And so us being in Gaston County means that we have a greater level of attention to what's going on the waters in Gaston County. And I think that's a good thing for the county and all the residents.
Very good. Yeah. I think it's, I wouldn't say it's a good kept secret, but it might be a good kept secret that it's actually located in Gaston County now.
Yeah.
Because I think the first time I was introduced to the Riverkeeper was maybe a program to my Rotary Club, but that's been years ago. Yeah. And I distinctly remember at the time, obviously it's located in Charlotte. Of course, that didn't cross my mind. Why isn't it on the water? But that's a great question. John, what do you envision the organization looking like 5 to 10 years down the road?
Yeah, when I saw that question on the list, that's a hard one for me right now because we're in the middle of our first 5-year strategic plan. When I took over the first year, we spent kind of digging into what do we want to do, and so we call that plan Vision 2025. So right now, it's hard for me to think much past 2025. I will tell you, in 2025, the headquarters in McAdenville will be completely done. I think you will see a very robust kayaking and outfitting program going on, not only on the South Fork, but across the entire basin. We received a donation of a piece of property in Fort Lawn, South Carolina, and so we're working to renovate that to build a South Carolina Southern Basin office. And we've just recently opened an office in Morganton, North Carolina, to give us a view of the northern part of the basin. So I hope by the end of that Vision 2025 strategic plan, we will have accomplished those two goals of our founder, which is to be on the water and to have a full basin view. Beyond that, it's kind of, what are my wildest dreams?
Gotcha.
I mean, ultimately, the goal of any riverkeeper organization is to reduce the number of impaired streams that are listed on the federal, what's called the 303D list. I'll try to stay jargon free, but, to try to reduce the number of miles of impaired streams in our waterway. Okay. And that's going to help everybody because that's the drinking water for 2.5 million people. And if we can reduce the pollution loads in our creeks and streams and our lakes, it saves us money. It doesn't cost us as much money to process that water. We're going to have, better recreational value. Nobody's going to have to worry about swimming or fishing or kayaking in any of the waters anywhere. So, that's the goal. It's always sometimes a one step forward and two step back, but,
right.
but we keep pushing towards it.
So you used that term a couple of times, impaired. So in relative to what you're talking about, is that related to pollution, or what is that? What is the somebody like myself could understand? What does that mean?
So impaired means the EPA, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, has levels of pollutants that are allowed for just about every pollutant you can imagine. So
okay. Right.
Bacteria is a real common one. So that's one that is easy for people to get a concept of. If somebody doesn't pick their dog poop up off of the side of the greenway, and we have a big rainstorm, and thinking about the greenway like along Catawba Creek right through the middle of Gastonia.
Yeah.
That rain washes that unpicked up dog poop and takes it into the creek. Well, that's going to take bacteria in there with it. And you don't want your kids playing around in the creek when there's a bunch of bacteria.
You're correct.
So the federal government says that you can have up to 235 parts per million of any sample of water of bacteria, and it's safe. If a creek or waterway is impaired for bacteria, it means that it's over 235 for 12 consecutive months of sampling. So it's a challenge where we're trying to reduce pollution loads. Sometimes that's bacteria. Sometimes it's things like turbidity, which comes from runoff, where you have sedimentation running from sometimes construction sites, sometimes from agricultural fields. It could be impaired for a lot scarier things like PFAS, which is a real buzzword pollutant right now that they're dealing with in the eastern part of the state, which is a byproduct of plastics development. So we're pretty fortunate here in the Catawba River Basin. We don't have a lot of bad actors anymore. Once upon a time, the mills would just dump dye straight into the river. Yeah. And there's some legacy pollutants there that have to be worked through and cleaned up. But what we're really focused on right now is bacteria, and then the turbidity that gets created by stormwater runoff. And it brings a lot of nasty stuff with it, heavy metals and bacteria along with that stormwater.
Okay, well, I appreciate that because, again, being somebody who's pretty ignorant of all this stuff, I appreciate you speaking to that in some layman's terms. I do understand parts for me, and we deal with that a lot with our industry, and having an engineering background, I just wouldn't have associated it, with that, some of the specifics. So, is there anything you haven't that I haven't asked, or anything you'd like to share about the organization before we kind of move on to the really important questions?
Well, I can't go through any podcast without making a shameless plug for people to become members.
Oh, absolutely.
We're about 50% of our funding comes from our 5,800 members.
Okay.
You can become a member for as little as $50 a year. And beyond just feeling great about helping protect your water, membership also gets you a lot of benefits. You get discounts for our kayaking programs and our summer camps and merchandise in our store, and you get invitations to special events and things like that. But, most importantly, membership's important to us because when we go sit down and talk with local officials, state officials, when we can say 5,800 other people care about what we're talking to you about, that gets people's attention.
Oh, sure.
You know,
That's a big enough number to matter.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we'd like, part of that Vision 2025 is we'd like to have 10,000 members by 2025. So, my big plug for people would be, become a member today, join as an individual or a family. The other piece that really is new for us that we're really trying to push is we feel like we have a great app, and it's available on the Apple or the Google store. It's got a lot of resources that help you be a part of what we're doing. So it's got a pollution reporter that if you see, nasty looking water running into a creek or a stream or a lake, you can just snap a picture of it, fill out a couple lines on the form and hit send. And it'll come right to us. It'll tag your picture, tell us exactly where it is. If you see trash, if you're out on your boat and you see a cove that's full of trash, same thing. You can just snap a picture of it. And actually, GSM is a sponsor of the Pollution and Trash Reporter, so we appreciate that very much. And that's a tool that helps us have eyes on the water.
So is that something if you searched it on one of the app sources, is it just Catawba Riverkeeper that you look up? Okay.
That's right, Catawba Riverkeeper app. And the other piece in there that's really important is the swim guide program. So we test 57 different sites around the basin every week from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and we're testing for that bacteria. And anytime the level goes up above that state standard, we're going to put a no swim advisory out. Oh, so if somebody who lives on Lake Norman or lives on Lake Wiley or Mountain Island Lake, they've got a favorite place they like to go tie up with their friends. The sandbar on Lake Wiley is really popular. We test out there every Thursday. We post the results every Friday on Swim Guide. So you can go check it out, and you can be confident that when you roll out on your boat on Saturday morning that it's been tested by an independent third party and it's safe to swim. If it comes back and it's red, I tell people, I know you want to go out there, but if it's red, you don't want to be swimming in other people's poop, or have other animals. If it's red and no swim advisory for bacteria, it means some that's bad stuff is in there.
If nothing else is learned from this podcast, that's a good standard is don't swim in poop, right?
Yeah.
When you said summer camp, again, you said it a couple of times, I realized that I skipped one of my favorite questions is, and you may not have an anecdotal story, but is there an example or a story that you could share about how a group was impacted, or something's very specific that you could share about, some impact that some of your initiatives have actually, you can share with that?
The one I wrote down, it relates to Swim Guide. So we started that program 2 years ago, and we started on Lake Wiley with just 9 sites. And the very first year, I think it was the 3rd or 4th week, one of our sites that we test is the Whitewater Center. And, they have an island right there across from the Whitewater Center. Yep. And they had a triathlon planned. And so they were going to have people doing an open water swim around that island. And we went out on Thursday. We took the sample. The race was supposed to be on Saturday. We got the results back at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and they were through the charts. So we weren't sure what was causing it. Mount Holly has a wastewater treatment plant just upstream. We now think that there was a leak or a discharge from there. But at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, I called Jeff Wise, the director of Whitewater Center, and said, "Hey, we've got a problem. Your Swim Guide site just came back and it is off the charts. And I see you've got a triathlon. There's supposed to be hundreds of people swimming around that island right through that site tomorrow morning. You need to call that off." They delayed it. They delayed it a week, and we were able to get out again next week, sample it. Everything was clear. And so that made us feel really good that we had a program that kept 400 people from swimming in polluted water because bacteria washes through. It has a 48-hour or 72-hour lifespan. So you get a little bit of rain, you get the regular flow of the water, it gets out of there, but you don't want to be in there when you have something like that happen.
Yeah, if I don't there's not many things I understand about water, but being my education background, I do have a concept of understanding the amount of water that is flowing at that rate, just the volume that moves. I mean, that was always a hard concept to get, but yeah, it'll move through a lot very quickly.
Yeah,
especially if you've got rain or anything on top of that.
Yeah, we say dilution is the solution to pollution when it comes to water. So you want rain and you want it moving.
That sounds like something off of this old Saturday morning.
It might be. I might have stole that from Sesame Street.
Yeah, that's terrific. That was Amy, are you old enough to remember Sesame Street? Or you know it? Oh, okay. Just curious. Is it still on? Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't know. My kids were never into Sesame Street, I don't guess. They were more, I don't know, Thomas the Train and stuff like that.
Mine were Barney. I have Barney age.
You know what?
kids.
Our oldest was Barney, and then we cured him of that. In fact, my kids are going to love me sharing this, but even to this day, when they're talking about Barney, they're actually talking about Barney Fife. When they were growing up, is they were never really talking about Barney the dinosaur. So I actually take that as a badge of honor that they know Barney as Barney Fife instead of Barney the dinosaur. Anyway, let's get back on track here. That's what I got to keep me together. So, John, kind of, before we get to this next, we kind of shift gears a minute. What advice would you give somebody wanting to get involved with an organization like yours? For the record, that was Amy drinking her water in the background. Nobody's hurt, but everything's okay. But, geez, microphone. Some good microphones we've got here. Yeah, whether it's somebody from just a volunteer standpoint or maybe even to make a career out of it, what kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, folks can get involved with us on a day-to-day basis. I mentioned already becoming a member. That's going to keep them in touch with what we've got going on. We have volunteer opportunities going on all the time. We have over 2,000 volunteers a year that get out and do stream cleanups. They do stream restoration. They help with our education programs. They help represent our organization at different festivals and things like that. So, reach out. We've got a place on our website at catawbariverkeeper.org that you can click volunteer here and get on a mailing list, and we'll send you all the opportunities as they come through. Come out to the boathouse. Just, come meet our staff, learn about what we do. We're open Thursday through Sunday, and folks can drop by and have a beer and, rent a kayak and hang out. And our staff there has got tons of information, can dig in deep on anything. And then, like everybody, follow us on social media.
Right.
Everything that happens in our world happens on social media. So whether you're curious about an algae bloom on Lake Wiley, or a wastewater spill, or something going on in your cove, hop on our social media and see if there's updates there. If there's not, reach out and we'll let you know.
All right, very good. Thank you. So we're going to come back to the Riverkeeper before we finish, but we're going to get to the serious stuff here just briefly. And this is what we call our "Are you really from, or do you really live in Gaston County" round? And this is especially for the staff there at Catawba Riverkeeper. I'm sure this is going to answer many questions that they have about you.
I hope they would know the answer to most
some
of these.
Okay. So first question, favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Well, I'm trying to expose them because a lot of them, drive out here from Charlotte every day. So we're going to take a little staff
field
trip to Tony's once we get through our busy season. I'm just a plain old vanilla guy.
Okay.
I'm kind of a boring guy when it comes to desserts, but Tony's vanilla is good for me.
Yeah, I was a chocolate guy until we had this taste test a few episodes ago, and I'm gonna have to go try some black cherry. I have to admit that was good, and for my buddy Vinny Cherry that's out there. Just for the record, he didn't say lemon, Vinny. That's an inside thing. Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Cheerwine.
Very good. Favorite local restaurant?
Station in Belmont.
Oh, yeah, I've been at the station. It's really good.
And I strongly recommend the street tacos.
Okay,
they're
the street
fantastic.
tacos at the station.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down. I don't forget that one. Now, I'm going to assume I already know the answer to this question, but favorite outdoor activity or place to visit here in Gaston County?
Oh, kayaking at the boathouse in McAdenville,
Okay,
of
I was
course.
going to say, if you didn't answer that, I was going to say, hey, what?
If I had to pick a second, I live down pretty close to Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden. I love going trail running on the Seven Oaks Trail.
Oh, yeah, it's a good trail. Yep. UNC, Duke, or NC State? This is a very important question, by the way, and determines whether we actually release this episode or not.
Well, it's Duke, and the answer to the next question is going to answer why.
Oh, okay. Duke. So, all right. Next question. What is something very few people know about you?
So I run Jay Billis's basketball camps for him, and Jay is a Duke grad, played at Duke, is on ESPN now, is a really good friend of mine, and I've been running his camps for this summer made 9 years. And so I have developed an affinity for Duke by getting to know Jay better.
Well, you know what? That's a good reason. It's better than some of the reasons I might hear for people to say Duke around here.
Yeah, and for the record, Jay's a fantastic guy. He's exactly the way he comes across on TV.
Yeah, I admit I followed him on social media, and of course I went to NC State, so I'm a huge in late '80s and early '90s. I'm a huge ACC sports fan, especially basketball. I got to see some great basketball when I was at NC State, and much of it was Krzyzewski against Valvano or Dean Smith or whatever. So, yeah, I have a real affinity for ACC basketball.
So you probably watched some games with Jeff Lebo at Carolina.
Uh-huh.
So he was my boss when I was a basketball coach. I was an assistant for him both at Tennessee Tech and then at Auburn too.
Oh, wow. See, that's terrific. Yeah, listen, around here, basketball is pay attention at all. And over the last 30, 40, 50 years even, there's some terrific basketball played around this area.
Absolutely.
How about, is there a recent book or a blog or article or something that you could share that you might recommend?
Yeah, so I'm actually rereading The Last Ballad by Wiley Cash. Wiley Cash grew up in Gastonia, and The Last Ballad is about the Luray Mill and the strikes at the Luray Mill in the early 1900s. And I'm rereading it because Wiley Cash has a new book coming out, and this was the last one that he wrote before, and so I wanted to kind of refresh my memory about his style. But it's a great story for residents of Gaston County to learn some of the history.
Oh, sure.
It's a historical fiction, but it's got Gastonia in it, it's got Belmont in it, it's got McAdenville, it's got Cramerton, and folks who live in Gaston County will recognize a lot of the roads and the places that he talks about, and just really gives you a sense of what this place was like when the mills were really humming. I mean, Gastonia was a booming place when the Luray Mill was humming around the turn of the century.
Yeah, no question about that. And I mean, I think that's probably fair to say some people, especially those that have moved here, because I think I just saw yesterday the census has just came out. We've had some decent growth, 12 or 13% growth since the last census, and so there's a lot of people moving here that probably may not know the history and how textiles was such a for lack of a better term, a dramatic force, and it had such a dramatic impact on our area. So I appreciate you sharing that. I will definitely. I've heard of that book, but I have not read it myself. So I appreciate you sharing that. So we're getting close to finishing up here, but got a couple more questions. So besides Catawba Riverkeeper, why would you say Gaston is such a terrific place?
Well, I hope this isn't the same answer that everybody gives, but for me, it's tons of outdoor recreation opportunities, okay. Whether it's Crowder's Mountain or being able to kayak on the South Fork or be out on Lake Wiley. We've got an awesome trail system, and it's growing here. George Poston Park, all the sections of Thread Trail that we have all throughout. But I also love the fact that you have access to Charlotte, but you have small town feel. When we first moved to the region, we lived up in the Lake Norman area. And to us, that area really felt like a kind of traditional suburban, world. When we moved to Gaston County 5.5 years ago, it really felt like a bunch of small towns. And that was what really drew us here. So the fact that you can live in a small town, have kind of a small town way of life, know a lot of people, be engaged with your community. But when you want to fly to Europe, you can do it nonstop from the Charlotte airport. You want to go to a Panthers game, you pop in 25-minute drive and go to a Panthers game. So, I love that mix of small town. And, I spend a lot of time with local municipal leaders talking about things that they can do to improve their water quality. And I tell every single one of them, you are in control. Everybody wants to be in Gaston County. So do what's right for your town, do what's right for your community, do what's right for our county. Yeah, when it comes to water quality, but for everything, from a way of life, that's what people were drawn to in this county. So that's what I love about it.
Well, that's a great answer. And when we've had similar answers, but not exactly the same. But, yeah, I think we are unique. And then, you didn't even go into, how close are we to the beach, how close we are to those Tennessee and northwestern North Carolina mountains, eastern Tennessee mountains, which I maybe hopefully go up that direction tomorrow for a day or so. So, I appreciate that greatly. And but this is my favorite question that I ask each episode. So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Definitely prepare yourself for life because your career is going to change.
Okay.
When I was 20 years old, all I thought about was being a college basketball coach. That was it. I played college basketball. I wanted to be a coach since I was a little kid. And I got, tunnel vision a little bit for a time in my early 20s that, that's what life was all about. And looking back, it was the lessons that I was learned while I was doing that have made me good at my job now. And so I would tell my 20-year-old self, like, don't get too caught up in, who's writing your paycheck. Focus on the things that are developing you as a person to be successful long term, because, I have a feeling my kids' generation and they're teenagers that they're going to change jobs 10, 15 times in their professional life.
We're already seeing that.
Not like my grandparents who
right.
Worked for the same company their entire life.
Completely different, yeah.
So I think being able to adapt professionally is really important today.
That's a good one, and I think that's the first time we've heard that. So, I would kind of equate that to there's a couple things I've seen over time, is where like a little graph that shows what our expectations are for life or our careers. It's a straight line, and the reality is it's all over the place, right?
Yep.
There's no real straight line between where you were, especially what you thought might be what life might look like 10 or 20 or 30 years later when you're 20.
Yeah. We've been interviewing for a new position at Riverkeeper, and I've been asking all the candidates. They're all, between 23 and 30.
Yeah.
I've been asking all of them, how does this job help you get to your dream job? And that's really been a hard question for them to answer. They haven't.
Sure.
I don't think that's something that young people think about, is like, I'm just taking this job because it sounds interesting. Like, what is this really doing to prepare me for the thing that I dream about? If it's not a step towards that, then I don't really want them in our organization, because I want them to be passionately working towards the thing that is next. I told the guy yesterday, I'm doing my dream job. I'm 45. I'm doing what I want to do for the rest of my life. So my job is to help you get to the same place. And so if this isn't part of fulfilling that goal, then this probably isn't a good place for you to work.
Is writing a book or being a speaker part of this for you? Because that last 2 or 3 minutes was pretty spectacular. We need to snip that and put it down somewhere.
Part of what I've learned about running basketball camps is, like, you get very short periods of time,
right? Yeah.
To get kids' attention, and so I guess I've developed the ability to just hit them with something. But if I float down the river one day and they don't want me anymore, maybe I'll think about a book.
Oh, wow. That was really, really good, John. I appreciate that. So this has really been good. So, I mean, we've already talked about a little bit this next question, but I want to maybe just kind of finish off with this and make sure we get the website, and we'll put all this information, make sure we get in our show notes. But where can listeners go to learn more about the organization or get involved or contact you directly?
Yeah, Catawba Riverkeeper.org.
Okay.
So everybody misspells Catawba, so I always spell it for people. Catawba. The Catawba Nation, the Native Americans who named this river, and most of them were just south of us here in South Carolina. We give homage to them. Social media is probably the best place to stay connected with us. We're very active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're growing on LinkedIn. So if you're interested in some of the things we're doing for businesses and working with businesses, that's a great place. If people want to reach out to me directly, it's pretty simple, john@catawbariverkeeper.org.
Okay.
Happy to respond to anything that anybody wants there. And probably most importantly is come see us at the boathouse.
Okay.
Thursdays and Fridays, we're open 4 to 8, and we do kayak rentals there. We allow people to come in and, they can launch from Spencer Mountain. They can paddle their own boats down and take out and have a great time, hang out with friends. We've got merchandise, restrooms. There's a beautiful section of Thread Trail right there. Saturdays and Sundays is really our big days. We do guided tours on Saturdays and Sundays, so you can hop on a bus there. We take you up Spencer Mountain, send you down the river with 2 professional guides. It's the best 3 hours you'll spend. Most people, if you have not been on that section of the South Fork, it blows your mind. There's some beautiful sections of Class 1 rapids through there. Get a little bump and some fun.
Yeah, believe it or not, I think you know my brother Joel. We were both took our sons through Y guides, the YMCA, and we were the Catawba tribe. And more than once, we did from Spencer Mountain down to McAdenville.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how smart that was with a bunch of young kids in a canoe, but man, it was terrific. What about? I know you've already mentioned it, but the River Sweep event coming up, the date, and just was there a separate website for that? Or?
Yeah, so it's Catawba Riverkeeper.org instead of Riverkeeper, it's River Sweep. It's on October 2nd. And right now, I think we have about 45 sites that people can choose from. That's growing every day. So you can go on there. There's a map that you can go and look and see what locations are near you. I think we're at 9 or 10 sites on Lake Wiley, plus 3 or 4 on the South Fork. So it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd, and you're done by noon. And if you register by September 15th, everybody gets a free T-shirt.
Oh. Very good.
So it's a great time.
Some swag is always good.
We'll have an after party at the boathouse, so you can show up with your T-shirt and you get your first drink free on us for Catawba River Sweep. So October 2nd, we're shooting for 1,500 volunteers this year. We had 1,400 last year, so need people to get out there and register and join us and help us clean up the river. All
right. Well, that's excellent. Well, John, this has been terrific. I appreciate your time, and something we've been doing, and I promise this wasn't planned. But I do a book recommendation every podcast, and the one I picked for this week is a book by Bob Goff called Dream Big. So it really ties in with what you just shared. It's what you just shared. So, and for me, that book kind of it talks a little bit about, I think sometimes we think too small. I think we get caught up in our day-to-day things, and I really like his take on that concept. And to finish up with our quote or my thought for the week. And again, ties into a lot of things we've talked about today, is about learning and educating yourself. But this comes from Dr. Seuss, and it's about never stop learning, educating yourself. And Dr. Seuss said, the more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Also, related to that, I heard something many years ago that said, don't let school get in the way of your education, because there's so many opportunities of learning and education after you finish former schooling, or at least that's been my experience. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us here at podcast@gastonsgreat.com. I actually do think we received an email recently, didn't we? Didn't we receive one email? So, hey, somebody's listening out there. So, again, if somebody's listening, just send us an email to make us feel good about ourselves. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com. And please follow us on our social media platforms. You can also find us and subscribe on most podcast services, such as iTunes, Spotify, and Google. Thanks again to John Searby from Catawba Riverkeeper for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Amy Anderson and Elizabeth King from GSM Services, and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.